You bought groceries 4 days ago. Half of them are already going bad, and somewhere an appliance manufacturer is counting on that. But there is a forgotten technique that changes everything. It uses two containers, wet sand and a cloth. No electricity, no refrigerant, no moving parts, nothing to plug in, nothing to break. With it, eggplants stay fresh for up to 27 days instead of 3. Tomatoes last 3 weeks instead of turning soft in less than a week. In larger versions, researchers have recorded shelf life extending from just 3 days to as much as 90 days. 3 months, using nothing more than clay, sand, and water. This isn't new. Over 2,400 years ago, ancient Persians were already using the same principle. In the scorching heat of cities like Yazd, where temperatures exceeded 40 degrees Celsius, they built massive structures called yakhchals. These domed buildings had thick walls and underground chambers designed to cool air through evaporation. Even in peak summer, some of these chambers reached near freezing temperatures. The science behind those structures is exactly the same as the simple two-pot system. Water evaporates. As it does, it pulls heat from its surroundings. That heat loss lowers the temperature inside the container. The result? A naturally cooled environment that preserves food far longer than normal. This principle wasn't limited to Persia. Across sub-Saharan Africa, rural communities used similar methods for generations. Women stored fruits and vegetables in unglazed clay pots surrounded by wet sand, not because they studied physics, but because they saw it worked. In 1995, a teacher from northern Nigeria named Muhammad Ba Abba took this traditional knowledge and refined it. He developed what became known as the pot-in-pot preservation cooling system. His setup was simple. One smaller clay pot sits inside a larger one with wet sand filling the gap between them. Food goes inside the inner pot and the top is covered with a damp cloth. The results were remarkable. Eggplants stayed fresh for 27 days instead of 3. Tomatoes and peppers lasted up to 3 weeks. Spinach, which usually wilts in a day, remained usable for nearly 2 weeks. The system gained global recognition. It was named one of the best inventions of 2001 by Time magazine. Ba Abba received an award from the Rolex Foundation and used the funding to distribute nearly 100,000 units across rural Nigeria. Even humanitarian organizations later used it to store medicines in remote areas. All of this without electricity. So why have most people never heard of it? The global refrigerator market is worth over $100 billion. Major companies depend on one belief, that cooling food requires machines, electricity, and ongoing costs. You are expected to buy a refrigerator, pay for electricity every month, maintain it, and replace it every 8 to 12 years. But a system made from 2 clay pots and sand costs less than a few dollars. It does not break. It does not need maintenance contracts. It does not rely on power. And that is the problem. You cannot build a billion-dollar industry on something that simple. Over time, people were taught that refrigeration is complex, that it requires advanced engineering, and that without electricity, food preservation is not possible. Meanwhile, one of the most effective and low-cost cooling methods ever developed was quietly ignored. But the science behind it is solid. Evaporative cooling is one of the oldest and most efficient heat transfer processes known. When water changes from liquid to vapor, it absorbs heat energy from its surroundings. That heat loss cools the surface it evaporates from. In studies published in scientific journals, evaporative cooling systems have shown dramatic results. In one large-scale test, a storage unit using this principle extended the shelf life of fruits and vegetables from 3 days to up to 90 days. Even in smaller systems like the clay pot setup, internal temperatures can drop by as much as 14 degrees Celsius below the outside air. In a 40 degrees Celsius environment, that means food is stored at around 26 degrees Celsius, low enough to significantly slow bacterial growth and spoilage. Of course, this system is not perfect. It works best in hot, dry climates where evaporation happens quickly. In humid environments, the cooling effect is weaker. It is also not designed to safely store meat or dairy like a modern refrigerator at 4 degrees Celsius. And it requires maintenance, mainly adding water once or twice a day. But for preserving fruits, vegetables, drinks, and even certain medicines without electricity, it is incredibly effective. In fact, for camping, off-grid living, or emergency situations, it can outperform many portable coolers and ice-based solutions. So how do you build one? You will need one large unglazed clay pot, one smaller unglazed clay pot that fits inside with a gap of about 5 centimeters, coarse sand, water, a cloth or burlap cover. First, place the smaller pot inside the larger one and make sure it sits evenly. Then fill the gap between them with sand. Next, slowly add water until the sand is fully moist but not flooded. Drain any excess water. Place your food inside the inner pot, leaving space for air circulation. Cover the top with a wet cloth. Keep the setup in a shaded, well-ventilated area. Add water regularly to keep the sand damp. That's it. Using this exact method, families in dry regions have reported keeping tomatoes fresh for 20 days, guavas for nearly as long, and leafy greens usable far beyond their normal lifespan. All for just a few dollars and no electricity. This knowledge was never truly lost. It existed for thousands of years, passed through generations, studied, and even recognized globally. But it was overshadowed by systems that were more profitable, not necessarily more accessible. 2 pots, wet sand, a cloth. Sometimes the simplest solutions are the ones the world forgets the fastest.